Welcome to Devine Intervention, shedding light on Illinois property tax.
Hello and welcome to Devine Intervention, shedding light on Illinois property tax with experienced property tax attorney Nora Devine. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and I'm excited to deep dive Illinois taxes today. Nora, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, of course.
So today we're going to focus on tax appeals. So tell me this, how often do you hear stories about property owners in Illinois attempting to handle their own tax appeals?
Every day, the assessing officials in Illinois they generally do a lot of outreach and they try to encourage people to come and appeal their taxes on their own. So you do get a lot of people trying to appeal their own taxes at the Cook County Assessor or at the Cook County Board of Review. Outside of Cook County, it's a little bit less common. I think the assessing officials are slightly less approachable out there, although they're very, very helpful with homeowners exemptions and making sure that building characteristics are correct and things like that. And they'll review appraisals and they'll review recent purchases and they can be somewhat helpful, but self-appeal help usually is pretty common in Cook County. People do go on the website and they fill out their online appeal form for either the assessor or the board of review.
How do those situations generally turn out when people handle it or attempt to handle it on their own?
Usually if the government says you're in good shape, if the government says you're in good shape, your taxes are fine, your assessment is equitable, your assessment is not unfair, then, sometimes people wonder if they're hearing the whole story. So sometimes people will go to a property tax attorney just to make sure that there isn't something else that can be done. Because it's in the government's interest to say that you're fairly assessed and that you shouldn't appeal. But if you go to somebody who charges a percentage of the savings to try to make movement for you and try to reduce your taxes, they're financially incentivized to try to help you and make the taxes lower. So if that person tells you you're in good shape, I don't think there's anything that can be done here. It's a little bit more credible and it's a little bit more like something that taxpayers will listen to a little bit more.
Okay, so what role does an attorney play in the property tax assessment appeal process?
An attorney or a non-attorney representative can file at the Cook County Assessor, and some people agree to disagree about whether or not that's, a non-attorney should be allowed to file at the Cook County Assessor. But at the Cook County Board of Review, if you're going to represent somebody before the Board of Review, you do have to be a licensed attorney. If you want to represent yourself, you can always do that. But if the property is held entitled by a corporate entity, then the Board of Review rules do require that you have an attorney involved. At the Illinois Property Tax Appeal Board, you're also allowed to appeal on your own behalf. But if the property is held entitled by a corporate entity, then again, you would need to hire a licensed attorney to help you with that.
Okay, so can you outline some of the challenges, maybe the common challenges or even pitfalls that property owners might face when appealing their tax assessment on their own?
Yeah, sometimes let's say that there was a 2-unit or a 3-unit apartment building that was then converted into a single family house. It might not behoove the taxpayer to change that classification. Sometimes, the taxpayer may be better off leaving it alone. So going to somebody that has the research capabilities to make sure that they run it one way or the other to see if you may be doing more harm than good by, because there's no obligation on the taxpayer at this moment to affirmatively go and correct their own property characteristics. Although if you do appeal, there are rules that you do have to follow regarding, being upfront and honest about what the characteristics are. So that's one example. And then also the tools that the government gives you to do your own research to try to understand whether your property taxes are too high are nowhere near as robust as the tools that are being used in terms of hardware and software and also subscription databases in order for you to learn whether or not you're assessed fairly and uniformly with your neighbors or whether you're assessed less than your fair market value. So it can be a big benefit to a taxpayer to go to somebody that does have all those systems in place and that can do all that research and do it quickly and then walk out of the conversation with at least a little bit of information. If there's nothing that can be done, at least you've seen what the sales are, at least you've seen how the neighboring properties are assessed on a square foot basis, and at least you can know that you've looked at your property record card and you can know that you've checked everything you can check to see if there may be some tax relief available.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. What other benefits does one get when hiring an attorney rather than trying to tackle it on their own?
Well, the attorneys that practice in this area of law are usually have a volume practice almost always, especially if they're representing residential properties, because usually residential tax bills are smaller than commercial tax bills. And in order to make enough revenue for the attorney's practice, they usually have to take on like a large volume of cases. And so what happens with a volume practice is that you get to know very, very well and intricately exactly what is possible and what is not possible. You're throwing the proverbial spaghetti at the proverbial fridge every day of your life in all these different counties in the state of Illinois, and you're learning, oh, this works here, but it doesn't work there, or this used to work in the past, but it doesn't work anymore, or, this really should work, but it's never worked before, and I'm going to keep trying and see if I can get some movement on this argument. And so I think you really gain the value of broad expertise when you go to somebody that has a lot of files and that has been working in this practice area for a long time.
I told you before, I used to live in Chicago and I grew up in northwest of Chicago. And so, yeah, I remember that even from just in general, there's so many differences amongst the counties. Like in Chicago is so different. And I'm not just talking about tax law, just everything is just, there's so many laws that are different in Cook County than they are in Lake County or DuPage or something like that.
It's true. And even if you look at the property tax code itself, there's multiple, maybe hundreds of references to in counties with 3 million or more, or in counties with less than 3 million. And they may as well be saying the exact words in Cook County versus in every county other than Cook. So yeah, there are major differences between Cook County and the rest of the state in some ways in the way that property tax law is administered.
Maybe this is a boring question. I don't know, but what is the reason for that? Why is Cook County always so different, it feels like, than everybody else?
Well, Cook County and St. Clair County. St. Clair County is way down by St. Louis. It's a pretty populous, like an East St. Louis area. And Cook County and St. Clair County are the only counties that are authorized to classify property by different property types. And in Cook County, they do that. So if you bought $1 million house in Cook County, your house is supposed to be assessed at 10% of its fair market value. So your assessment would be $100,000. Well, if you bought $1 million commercial property in Cook County, your assessment should be $250,000 because the Cook County assessment classification ordinance treats those two property types differently. So the house is assessed at 10%, the commercial property is assessed at 25%. So you can see how that would result in a very different tax burden between those two different property types. Whereas comparing that to the rest of the state, St. Clair County can classify, but they don't. So other than Cook, every single county in the state of Illinois is assessed at 33.33%, which means if you bought a $1 million commercial property across the street from a $1 million house out in DuPage County or Lake County or any other county in the state, the assessed values for both properties would be $250,000. So you can see they've shifted the burden from the residential to the commercial by classifying the properties in that way. And then they apply an equalization factor, which takes some of the sting out of the burden shift. But that's beyond the scope of this episode, and it's probably an episode of its own in terms of what an equalizer is and where it comes from and what it does.
I'm sure there's a lot of aspects of what we're going to talk about that could be their own episode. I mean, tax law is not exactly the most easy, light reading you could ever do.
Yeah, true. But, and the legislature is always trying to change it. The Illinois General Assembly thinks that the answer to everything that ails the citizens of Illinois is just a property tax code change. So they propose maybe 130 changes to the property tax code every single legislative session. Wow. And we see like recurring themes of what the legislature wants to do in terms of changing this exemption this way or that way, or changing the way things are done, not just in the assessment process, but also in the tax enforcement process, which in Illinois is a tax sale and tax deed process, which is definitely its own episode.
Yeah, we might say that a lot. So how can an attorney help in gathering and presenting evidence to support a property tax appeal?
For us, the first thing we do when somebody says that they think that their tax bill is too high is we pull the property record card from the government themselves, and we send a copy of that record card to the taxpayer to see if there's any errors, because that's pretty easy. If they're saying your house is bigger than it is, then that's a pretty easy way to make a difference. If they're saying you have more land than you have, that's an easy way to make a difference. If they're saying your house is brand new, but it's not, obviously it's pretty easy to show the government, hey, there's no way this house would sell for that. It's not a new house. It's a 50-year-old house or an 80-year-old house or whatever it is. Or, hey, if you've only got 3 bathrooms and, they're saying you have 6, it's like, what? Where did this come from? And,
I would know that.
Yeah.
I think.
But yeah, it could be a difference between how big your garage is, or maybe your garage burned down and the assessor's still taxing your property as though you have a detached garage.
Mhm.
So it's little things like that. So the first thing we do is pull the property record card, send it to the client. We have them look it over. Next thing we do is we try to get a sense for what the client thinks the property's worth. Do you have a recent appraisal? Did you buy it recently? If you were about to list your house for sale, what would you list it for? These kinds of questions, and then a question I always like to ask, if the assessor has it assessed at 350,000, I say, okay, let's say I wanted to buy your house for 350,000 right now. Is your knee-jerk reaction heck yes or heck no? And I can tell a lot about whether the property is overassessed in terms of market value just based on the answer to that question. But even when a property is not overassessed in terms of market value, you can still make a lot of improvement for the taxpayers' tax liability just by comparing the property to the other properties in the neighborhood. Because what we've seen across the county of Cook is that the properties that have sold recently tend to be assessed higher, much closer to what the recent sales prices were. And then the properties that have not traded hands recently, those properties are not getting huge increases. So when you can establish that pattern and when you can show that to the decider of fact that, hey, here we have these houses that have sold and they're being assessed sky high, and we have all these other houses that have not sold and they have not been increased. That is a pattern that the deciders of fact will look at and will act on, because our Constitution in the state of Illinois says that we have to assess properties uniformly. So those are the three primary arguments for why your tax bill could be reduced: is either the property characteristics are incorrect and not in your favor, or the property could not sell for what the assessor is saying that it's worth for tax purposes, or you look around the neighborhood and you see that similarly classified properties in the neighborhood are not assessed in a similar way on a per square foot basis. So those are the things that we check. And we have the multiple listing service, which, because I'm a lawyer, but I'm also a real estate broker. So I follow the market in every single neighborhood in my whole county, and actually in multiple counties in the state. And I have the research tools because of the MLS, the multiple listing service, to see very detailed hard data about listing times and price adjustments and inventory and inventory times and recent sales and not so recent sales, photos, interior photos, exterior photos. So it's a very powerful tool to try to help a client see what their property may be worth or what it's not worth. So that helps. And then also in Cook County, we subscribe to the raw data service that the Cook County assessor offers. So we have sophisticated software tools that help us crunch that data and try to understand very deeply like how the property is assessed compared to other similar properties in the neighborhood. And if they're high, then they're high, and we appeal it for them, and we try to get somebody to take a look and give them some relief.
Yeah, that's that MLS thing. That's interesting. That really, my wife's a realtor, and so yeah, I've seen the MLS before, or seen her working on it, and I mean that's a huge advantage to be able to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, it came out in the news maybe 8 years ago, prior to the current administration, that they were using like Zillow and Redfin, and it was said kind of disparagingly about the government that they were relying on those sort of very public tools. But I mean, like if the data is good on those portals, on Zillow and Redfin, but you can't do nearly what I could do in terms of research and reports and analysis. Data. Yeah, It's very, very robust, the multiple listing service.
Out of curiosity, so obviously if you make improvements to your house, it's going to be worth more money, and if it's assessed, then you'll get higher taxes. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think the main thing you can do to increase your assessment is add square footage. If you're adding an addition, you're surely going to have, if not immediately, then at least within 4 years, you're going to have an increase in your assessed value. In Illinois, there is something called the home improvement exemption, which takes about $75,000 worth of the market value on whatever improvement you did, and it exempts that portion of the value from. So if you put on an addition that costs $150,000 to add, then theoretically, if the law is applied the way that it was intended, about half of the value of that addition would be exempt from real estate tax, and then the other half may impact your value a bit. But as far as doing things like putting a roof on or painting your siding or things like that, those are less impactful, just because sometimes people say, I haven't maintained this house, the roof is leaking, the siding's falling off, and the windows are all barely functioning as windows. I want property tax relief. Well, property tax code doesn't give you relief under those facts because, that's maintenance. That's maintenance.
Yeah,
of
you
the
should
house.
be doing those things. Yeah.
You may get a condition adjustment in some places that are sophisticated enough with their data collection in order to apply something like that. But and then conversely, that they shouldn't then be increasing your assessment just because you did, maintain your roof, or you did maintain your siding, or you did, switch out your windows when it was time to do so. So, things that will impact it is adding square footage, adding a bathroom, finishing your basement, replacing your detached garage, finishing your attic, those kinds of things. So if you pull a permit for those things, then whatever amount you disclose on the permit could then, impact how they are assessing your property. In Cook County, the data collection is not very good. And it's not like the current assessor's fault or anything. It's just been, decades and decades of just kind of falling behind on keeping current with the status of the properties. There's an enormous part of our housing stock in Cook County is like apartments that have between 2 and 6 units. And if you look at what the data is, they know how big it is. Usually they know how big the land is. Usually they know whether there's a garage, detached garage. They know whether it's brick or frame. They know how many units there are. And that's kind of it. So that's it. They don't know what kind of rent the property is bringing in. They don't know when's the last time the kitchen was redone. They don't know if the attic is finished many times. They don't know what condition the roof is in. That's Cook County. Now, outside of Cook County, instead of one assessor for 1.8 million pins, you have multiple different assessors. So you may have 12 assessors in DuPage. You may have 20 assessors in Will County. And so they have a much lower number of property index numbers that they're assessing. And so you ask for a property record card from those folks and you get a robust property record card that has maybe, 30, 35 data points on it. They know like what color the car is that's parked in the driveway sometimes. It's, so it's a different world. So I think that, it's really easy to appeal taxes in Cook County because the data is in the status that it's in. It's just not very robust and it's hard for them to keep up with it. It's hard for them to get that permit data and act on it. And they don't have enough field people to go out and take, put boots on the ground and see how the property's changed or what's going on with it. Outside of Cook County, it's a totally different ballgame. They are much more accurate. It's harder to appeal taxes outside of Cook County. And the reason is because the upfront data collection just has so much more detail.
How does your experience influence the appeal process and the likelihood of a favorable outcome?
Experience in terms of impacting the outcome?
Yeah, like when someone's trying to, if they're going to choose an attorney, if they decide to go with an attorney, choosing an experienced one that has a lot of work in this and has been doing this for years, does that influence the process and likelihood of a favorable income in your opinion?
I think that, they've, in the recent years, I think they've done an enormous amount of work on trying to be more impartial to the representatives that are bringing cases to the Cook County assessor or to the Board of Review. So whatever benefit you get from experience is not clout based, if you know what I'm saying. It's really more, and it used to be like this practice area used to be like that. There was this perception you should hire somebody that's, connected. Not only has that kind of gone away, it's become a little bit of it's become a large liability for people. They don't want to be on the cover of the Tribune with their property tax, reduction story being talked about because of who they hired and whether or not they have some, pull in local government or state government. So in terms of clout, I would say that's not really how you hire an attorney anymore. I think it used to be that way. In terms of experience, I think that most of the attorneys in Cook County are doing a good job as long as they have, kind of all the research tools available, as long as they're keeping up with the assessor's raw data, which is not cheap to have, and keeping up with the software platforms that are needed to kind of make use of that data. So the firms that are following that standard of care are getting about similar results. I don't think anybody's getting like, I'm getting great results compared to the whole world, because that's just not like kind of reality. I think where the benefit of experience comes in is when somebody can tell you whether or not there is room for more relief at the next level of appeal. So, there used to be, not so long ago, maybe even just 5 years ago, some firms would put it right in their fee agreement, like, we are never going to the property tax appeal board for you. We are not even going to think about it. You sign this agreement saying you understand that. But now these days, sometimes it really is the right thing to do to go to the property tax appeal board, just because they do implement different standards when they're reviewing the same evidence that might have been reviewed at the level below. And so somebody that's really experienced and someone that's dealing with a lot of volume is going to be able to counsel the taxpayer through whether or not it's a good idea to seek further relief. So I think that's where the experience comes in.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Well, thanks for tuning in to Devine Intervention, shedding light on Illinois property tax with experienced property tax attorney Nora Devine. For more information or to connect with Nora, you can visit thedevinelawgroup.com. And please be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments. Nora, great to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.